It happened during Sunday dinner. My father raised his glass, smiled at the crowded table, and said Sarah was the kind of daughter any parent would be proud of. A nurse with a house, a stable job, and a bright future. Then he glanced at me and added that not everyone was meant for success. Some people just drift through life and hope others carry the weight. The room went still. Forks paused midair. I could feel every pair of eyes avoiding mine. I sat there frozen, my chest tightening, trying not to let my face show anything. No one said a word. Not my mother. Not even Sarah. And in that silence, something broke in me. I realized in that moment I would never be enough for them. Not because I wasn't successful, but because they had already decided who I was. That dinner wasn't a slip or a joke. It was who they were when they thought I'd stay quiet. I smiled, nodded like I was fine, and kept eating. But inside, I made a decision I didn't even have words for at the time. I was done chasing their version of success. Sarah was always the golden one. She became a nurse right out of college, bought her first home at 26, kept her credit score above 780, and never seemed to miss a step. She showed up to family dinners with stories from the hospital, brought wine in a leather carrier, and everyone would light up when she walked in. I was the opposite. I studied design, worked gigs at coffee shops and marketing agencies, and lived with 2 roommates in a noisy apartment with thin walls. I didn't own a car. I didn't wear tailored coats or talk about patients or mortgages. I brought a salad in a plastic bowl and sat at the edge of every conversation, just close enough to hear how little they thought of me. At birthdays, holidays, and even funerals, the pattern was always the same. They'd ask Sarah about her job, her house, and her plans. They'd clap when she mentioned promotions or new certifications. Then they'd glance at me and say things like how creative I was or how free-spirited. It was never cruel, just dismissive, just enough to remind me where I stood. I started to dread gatherings, not because I didn't love my family, but because I couldn't keep pretending I didn't notice the difference. They spoke about Sarah like she was proof that they'd done something right. And I was the awkward question mark they couldn't solve. I worked hard. I took care of myself. But somehow, my choices never felt real to them. Like my whole life was just a phase I hadn't grown out of yet. Every time I achieved something, it felt like I had to shrink it down just to be allowed at the table. Eventually, I stopped sharing altogether. If they weren't going to see me, I figured I'd stop trying to be seen. It started small. A dinner at a steakhouse to celebrate my parents' anniversary. I found out about it when Sarah posted a group photo on Instagram. When I asked my mom why I wasn't invited, she said I wouldn't have felt comfortable because it wasn't really my scene. I asked what that meant, and she laughed softly. Said it was just for the kids who could appreciate fine dining. Another time, they had a weekend trip to the lake house. I got a text from my cousin asking why I didn't come. I didn't even know they'd gone. When I brought it up later, my dad said they figured I'd be too busy with work or too tired from the city. It was always wrapped in these soft excuses that sounded polite if you didn't listen too closely. Then there was Grandma. I'd been helping her for months, fixing her computer, driving her to appointments, making sure her bills were paid on time. At a family brunch, my father stood up and announced that Sarah would now be handling Grandma's finances because she was the responsible one. He said it directly to the room and glanced at me like it needed to be said aloud, like I should know my place. I started writing things down. Every comment, every invitation I never got, every passive insult disguised as concern. I took screenshots of texts, saved voicemails. I wasn't planning revenge. I just needed to understand if I was imagining it. I wasn't. The pattern was real. They needed me to be the one who didn't have it together. That story made them feel better about who they were. Each time they left me out, It stopped hurting a little less and started making more sense. I wasn't invisible. I was intentionally dismissed. And eventually, something inside me stopped wanting to be included. I realized inclusion wasn't the goal. Dignity was. And they were never going to offer it freely. I stopped waiting for them to ask how I was doing. Instead, I turned my focus inward. Every evening after work, I came home, opened my laptop, and worked on building something that was mine. I created logos for small businesses. I designed websites for local nonprofits. I charged less than I should have in the beginning, but I was learning. On weekends, I watched online courses. I took notes on branding, marketing, pricing, and contracts. I reinvested everything I earned back into software, books, and tools. The first time I made over $1,000 in a month, I didn't tell anyone. I just paid my rent in full and stocked my fridge without guilt. By the end of the first year, I had 3 regular clients and nearly $7,000 in savings. I cut back on unnecessary spending and tracked every dollar. I started waking up early just to work before my job started. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave me something I hadn't felt in years. Control. I wasn't stuck. I was building. At the 2-year mark, I crossed $15,000 saved. I gave my landlord notice. I signed a lease on a 1-bedroom apartment across town. Clean, bright, and all mine. No one in my family knew. Not because I was hiding it, but because they'd never asked. They never checked in. Never wondered what I did with my time. That silence became my space to grow. While they kept telling the story of the daughter who couldn't get it together, I became the woman who didn't need them. My success wasn't a loud announcement. It didn't need applause. It was the quiet kind that came from staying consistent when no one was watching. The kind that didn't need to prove anything, just existed. They had no idea I was already gone. One night, Sarah borrowed my laptop during a family visit. She forgot to log out of her banking app. I didn't mean to look, but the screen was still open when I picked it up. 3 credit cards, all maxed out. Over $18,000 in debt, multiple late fees, past due notices. It felt like seeing behind a curtain I didn't ask to pull. I closed the laptop and said nothing. I didn't confront her. I didn't tell my parents. I just sat with it. The perfect daughter, the one they praised at every turn, was drowning. And no one knew. Or maybe no one wanted to know. It hit me then that they didn't just overlook me. They needed Sarah to be flawless so they wouldn't have to face the cracks in their own expectations. A few weeks later, Grandma pulled me aside after dinner. She told me she'd been watching, quietly, for years. She said my father used to play guitar every night, had dreams of touring, writing songs, maybe making a life out of it. But he gave it all up to become an accountant because that's what was expected of him. She looked at me gently and said, "He sees himself in me, that my freedom reminds him of what he gave up, and that he doesn't know how to love it without resenting it." I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just nodded. It finally made sense. The rejection. The distance. It was never just about who I was. It was about what I represented. I stopped needing them to see me clearly, because someone finally had, and it was enough. The living room was full of people holding glasses of champagne. Sarah's new condo gleamed with polished floors and fresh paint. My father stood near the fireplace, giving another toast that sounded more like a resume readout. He praised Sarah's discipline, her home ownership, and her steady career. Then he looked at me and made a joke about how some people are still figuring things out in their 30s. The room laughed softly, like they didn't know whether it was okay. I stood up. I said I had something to share, pulled out my phone and opened an email, read aloud the payment confirmation from a new client, $3,000 for a full branding package. Then I looked at my father and said I had 3 clients like that, all on monthly retainers. Told him I'd saved $15,000, paid off my debts, and signed a lease for a 1-bedroom apartment I would be moving into next week. Nobody said a word. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't smiling. I was done. Then I turned to Sarah, quietly, without venom. Said I knew about the credit cards, the debt, the late fees, that I didn't judge her, but I was tired of playing the role they gave me just so she could keep hers. Her face changed. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Grandma stepped forward, put her hand on my arm. She said it was time someone in the family spoke the truth. That respect should be earned, not handed out based on appearances. My father tried to say something, but I didn't wait to hear it. I pulled my house keys from my purse and set them on the coffee table. I told them I wasn't angry. I was simply done performing for people who never bothered to see me. Then I turned and walked out, calm and whole, not needing anyone to follow. The new apartment was small but bright. It had white walls, clean lines, and just enough space to feel like mine. I unpacked slowly, one box at a time, letting each corner become familiar on my terms. In the first month alone, I signed 2 more clients. One was a law firm, the other a nonprofit. My income crossed 6 figures for the first time, not because I chased it, but because I stayed consistent. I finally felt calm, not excited, not overwhelmed, just steady. My mother called a few weeks later. She said they hadn't realized how hard I'd been working. She didn't apologize for the years, just the tone. My father never said a word, but Sarah reached out. She told me she always felt like she had to be perfect, that watching me choose freedom over approval made her jealous in ways she couldn't explain. I didn't feel angry anymore. I didn't feel much of anything toward them, to be honest. It was like I had walked through a door they didn't know existed. On the other side, I had space. I had income. I had peace. One night, I sat on the floor of my living room, legs crossed, laptop closed. No noise, no audience, no applause. Just silence. And in that silence, I didn't feel empty. I felt whole. I realized that real freedom wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about never needing them to be right in the first place. If you've ever been the one they underestimated, the one they talked over, or the one they quietly left out, I want to hear your story. Tell me where you're watching from and share the moment you realized you didn't need anyone's approval to know your worth. Whether it happened last year or just this morning, your voice matters here.